How's it going, everyone? My name is Graham and welcome to Two Left Thumbs. I'm doing a video today on secrets, Easter eggs, hidden references and such all throughout Delta Rune. I'm not going to label any of them specifically as one or the other because they might fall under multiple categories or you might not consider them any of them. There's a lot to unpack in this game, so it's kind of all over the map. There's like 100 different instances of alternate takes of dialogue and things like that. I'll try to keep it more to the secret and Easter egg side as much as possible, but some of them are just kind of general points of interest. I hope you guys are comfortable with how freeform this is going to be. I'm going to try and share things in the order you would encounter them as well. Cool, so strap yourselves in and let's start rattling some of these off. Probably the most obvious and least interesting one I can bring up is the fact that Deltarune is an anagram of Undertale, Ralse is an anagram of Asriel, and Chris is an anagram of Frisk minus the F, so it doesn't really work out. Those are the only 3 examples I know in the whole game, but it kind of lends itself to the whole alternate universe thing. Once you have one completed file, the background changes to the 3 heroes standing in front of the fountain. As far as I know, there's no special interactions when you create a specific vessel, but there are a few interesting dialogue alternates you can get when you choose specific names for the vessel and the creator. So there's quite a few names in this opening section that can give you a special bit of dialogue. Specifically, I'm punching in Susie right now, but if you do Susie, Chris, Noelle, Toriel, Asriel, Asgore, Sans, Papyrus, Alphys, Undine, Rudy, Birdly, Caddy, Braddy, Gerson, Jockington, or QC, then you do end up getting the exact same prompt. An interesting coincidence. And that's all it is. It just acknowledges the fact that you picked a name that exists within the game. If you were to do the vessel name as anything else and the creator name as one of those, it would give you a similar prompt. And if you name them both the same thing, of course. Of course. Of course. Of course they are the same. Just a little bit of extra flavor text there. So for this example, I made the vessel Chris and the creator Susie. You're about to meet someone very, very wonderful. And I think that actually happens when you make the creator Susie, Chris, or Ralse. 2 more that are slightly more interesting. If you name the character Gaster, then the game restarts, it goes back through the intro cutscene again, you have to redo everything. If you name the creator Gaster, the game just straight up crashes. You have to actually go back into your files and reopen the game altogether. The exe file name changes as you're playing the game, goes through the dark, the return, the death, and after you complete the game, it just becomes Deltarune. I mean, this one's a little on the nose, but the Delta Rune itself is returning from Undertale. Toriel would wear it on her shirt. It's a very recurring bit of symbology. There's a flower poster on the wall there. We can obviously read into that if we want to. It's a beautiful day outside. In Undertale, that's pretty ominous because it's what Sans says to you in the genocide run right before the boss fight. This is just a goofy bit of messing with Toriel you can do if you just flush the toilet over and over again. On the 3rd flush, she comes knocking. Chris, is everything alright in there? On the 6th flush, she knocks a little more frantically. Chris, what are you doing? You did not put a bath bomb in the toilet again, did you? And on the 9th flush, she comes knocking again. Chris, if anything bad happens, you are paying for the plumbing bill. And there's no more beyond that. It's just the 9, just the 3 separate little dialogues. It's a trash can. Somehow, it's emitting a pleasant floral scent. So I think this is just a testament to Toriel being a good housekeeper and making even her trash can smell good. But it does kind of play into a funny joke later on. Her chair, straight out of Undertale, it's the Chairiel, the beloved living room chair. I guess it's a reference. Maybe it's just a joke. I don't know. I like it, though. This one is more of just, I think, a convenience for players who have played the game more than once. It's only accessible if you've already beaten the game, but it does kind of have some interesting story implications. It's your bed. If you go back to sleep, you may miss a lot of important things. They make sure to highlight that. Will you go to bed? Sleep. For some reason, you decided to go back to sleep. But when you opened your eyes, boom! It cuts all the way ahead to when you're actually already in the dark world. So all that stuff in the morning with Toriel, the school, everything gets skipped. I think this is only available if you've are playing the game for the second time. A wrist protector, and it just lets you speed through dialogue much more easily. Another very helpful thing for people who are doing multiple playthroughs. This one might be reading a bit too far, but when Ralsei has the cloak on, he looks an awful lot like the river person. But you know, that might just be how Toby draws cloaks, so I don't want to speculate on that too much. Now, this is kind of just like an alternate dialogue take, but when you're fighting the dummy, you can hug the dummy, or you can just hug Ralsei over and over again. This is kind of an interesting string of dialogue that happens. On the third one, he actually says, "I've never been hugged by anyone before," and starts to blush. Besides the dummy, to test it out. He's practiced hugging on the dummy. So I don't know anything about it. Sorry, I suppose you're the one teaching me. Ha. And then any hug after the third just becomes kind of uncomfortable. Just like if you tried to hug someone 3 times in real life. Now if you get Chris and Ralsei facing in opposite directions, as close as you can possibly get them to one another, it's kind of difficult to get it so that Chris is behind Ralsei. It's much easier when they're on the exact same plane as one another. But eventually Ralsei gets kind of bashful, looks down, and blushes. It's very cute. It just kind of reminds me of the hugging from earlier on in the game. Interesting little bit about Chris's equipment. He starts with the wood blade, a wooden practice blade with a carbon reinforced core. When you're in the above world, Chris walks around holding a pencil. So a carbon reinforced core is like the graphite on the inside of a pencil. But you can also purchase the spooky sword, a black and orange sword with a bat hilt, much cooler, but at the end of the game, it actually affects what your overworld item is. Now you can see Chris is no longer carrying the pencil as a weapon, he instead has Halloween pencil because of the spooky sword. These doors are pretty interesting. They start out as just these empty frames, but eventually when these doors start becoming usable, they start to have a glowing flame underneath the door and look oddly similar to the door to Sans' room in Undertale. Now this goes into some big new theory now that Sans is the only one who exists across these 2 universes, and he uses these doors to teleport all over the place across time and space. Pretty cool little tie-in there. Kind of an interesting little thing, when they fix the teleportation door, the horse now appears in front of us, even though we just saw him a few screens before. You go back, he's not here anymore, so I guess the implication there is that he teleported there ahead of you. There's a worm up here, and he lives a wormy life. I'm mostly kidding, this isn't a secret or anything, I just don't know what the point of this character is. I think it's just there just for kicks. When you go to the Smith Malleus, you can fix all sorts of things, one of which is the broken piece of cake that we got much earlier. It is now the top cake. Top cake itself is a pretty strong item, heals 160 HP to the whole team. But that door to the field is now available and we can backtrack a little bit. It's a bit of a walk back, but you can take it all the way back to the top chef instead of using it at the end battle or wherever you choose. My friend, share in my riches. I have many worse cakes I do not want. If you're not carrying a cake, come here and I'll give you one, forever. You traded the top cake for the spin cake. Now I'm gonna continue to spin and cry, spin and cry. So it's only half as good as the top cake is, but if you ever use it, you can just come back to Top Chef and he'll give you another one. This mysterious fellow that you encounter in the forest is in fact Lancer in disguise. Nigh unrecognizable, but it is in fact him. That's kind of a hidden in plain sight type secret. This one just makes me laugh, so I wanted to show it off. When you go to end your machine, it normally says this is your machine, is that okay? If you make him all duck, your machine sucks ass. Is that okay? In this section here where you get chased by this damned bird, try not to die. I'm not doing it very effectively. At the very end there, you ring the bell, and then you see that his face kind of like runs away there, which is kind of strange. It stood out to me in my original playthrough, but I didn't think to go back for it. Then you go back to the start here, his beak has run back to the opening thing here. It's a new NPC to talk to. These birds are pissing me off. I'm the original Star Walker. That's about it. That's all there is to that little character. Now, going about it right to left, when the beak jumps off the bird's face and you run back across, you can actually catch up to him and have both of them on the screen at the same time. So I might be kind of mistaken, even though they look similar, maybe they aren't actually the same thing. But his dialogue is still the same. The birds are pissing me off. I'm the original Star Walker. So at the end of the area with the bird, you enter this separate area. If you just kind of spastically go back and forth between them, eventually you find this hidden area of this lone tree. He is behind the tree. You wrap yourself around the tree, start talking. Well, there's a man here. He offered you something. Yes, you received an egg.
Can I offer you a nice egg in this trying time?
Well, there's not a man here. He left. Now it's just a regular old tree with nothing behind it. The egg now sits in your key item inventory. Not too important. Not too unimportant. And then when you leave, it spits you back out by the bake sale here. If you try to use your cell phone at any point, it doesn't really go through, and you start getting these noises that sound just like Gaster from Undertale. So that's just kind of spooky, I guess. This little bit of dialogue about inviting the guard to visit the trash can is a callback to a line Papyrus had back in Undertale. By flipping around wildly in the stats menu, you can change some of the details about these characters. Ralsei's kindness sometimes becomes dogness, and is just set to a value of 1. And now and again, for Chris, you just get a stat that is dog, and you just get a silly sleeping dog there. Just a random thing that happens. It's, the only way to make it appear is just flip back and forth, and eventually it shows up. Once you leave the castle, past this door, come all the way back to this little area here, which I think you can access earlier, but I forgot to go check it out. There is a weird hitbox thing going on here, where you can actually walk beyond that, and you can just keep walking out of the game. As far as I can tell, indefinitely, it seems to be just a glitch. Now, this is more of just a joke again, but it's one I didn't get immediately because I kept reading this guy's name as Ruxel's card. You eventually get the item that's Ruxel's Rue. R-O-U-X is a real word, it's pronounced Rue, which means the master of puzzles in the same theme as spades, clubs, diamonds, all that, is Rule's card. It went way over my head. It's my favorite joke in the game, though, once someone finally pointed it out to me, and I just loved it enough that I wanted to share it. When he presents his puzzle, if you talk to him instead, he says, lost, frightened, confused, good! This is super obscure, but it's actually a reference to a bit of dialogue from a game called I Am Mean.
Lost, frightened, confused, good!
In the hearts room here with the Hathies and the 4 different beds, you can see when you look at the different characters, they have unique classes. We have Chris the leader, Susie the dark knight, and Ralsei the prickly prince. If you inspect all the beds, looks like a bed. Will you rest here? No, you won't. It's not your bed. If you inspect all 4 beds, you've thoroughly investigated. Your rank was upgraded to bed inspector. So if you go back there, you're now no longer leader, you're now bed inspector. This is a bit of a weird one, but it comes up the second time you fight this little doggo checker guy with the little crown on his head. If you chase after it immediately after the battle, you can watch it sliding away, and if you catch up, you can interact with it. There she blows. It's going off to live a better life now. The manual that Ralsei gives you, the handmade book full of various tips and tricks, you can choose to throw it on the ground. Yes, confirm. You drop the manual on the floor with a resounding thud. Hey Chris, what are you doing? Oh no, is that the manual? Looks like you accidentally dropped it. Here you go, Chris. You don't want to lose that. You got the manual, again. But if you want to be real heartless, you can go back and throw it on the floor a second time. You toss the manual hard. Its pages scatter in the wind. That's okay, Chris. I'll just make a better one next time. Poor Ralsei. When Susie eventually officially joins the party, her belt buckle actually turns from an X into a heart. Around the same time, she finally pushes her hair out of her eyes. You can finally see her eyes in her profile picture. The interesting thing here is that we never actually get to see Chris's eyes. It's kind of weird hints at something sinister going on there. And we can start assembling the 3 pieces of the key that'll allow us to access a secret boss at the end of the game. The first of which, when you get into the elevator here, you can go back to the prison floor or the regular floor, or there's the question mark thing that, I don't know, moves Willy Wonka Chocolate Factory laterally across to this room with the staircase, where you get to talk to the strange prisoner here at the bottom of the stairs. Once you've completed chatting with the strange prisoner, then you can actually go back to that first shop. Now there's a new dialogue option there where you can talk to him about the strange prisoner. Through that you can get access to Broken Key A. So in this area with the dancing, spinning paper cutout people, there is this one tiny section here where there's nothing indicating you can walk through it, but if you go down through there, there's this alternate path. You hook around here past the rabbit guy, and then you can get the Broken Key B. Pretty early on in things, once you solve this puzzle here, past this guy, going up to the top, there's this that tells you that you need to come back here once you've completed the card castle, because you need to know the order of the rooms so that you can enter it here to access this chest. Diamond Heart Club Spade opens things up for you, and you open the treasure chest and you get the Broken Key C. Once you have all 3 of these key pieces, you can take them to Malleus and you can forge them into one complete key. Taking the key back to the strange prisoner, presenting it to the door, allows you to access the hardest fight in the game against Jevil, a Joker-like character who is just incredibly difficult to beat. One particular thing of note during this Jevil battle, he has this carousel attack where all these horses run by and they're impossible, they're so hard. But sometimes they appear as ducks instead, and very, very rarely one of those ducks will have the Everyman's head. Everyman was part of an attack that the Reaper Bird used in Undertale. This Everyman also appears in some graffiti in the overworld. Speaking of which, it's probably a good time to move on and start talking about the overworld stuff. Now, even though the end game overworld section is quite short, it does have a very dense amount of references and Easter eggs and such. Now, there's quite a lot going on in this room. A lot of it is kind of on-the-nose stuff. The different colored carpet here is the field and the forest. Then there's the great board that you go through, the different cards going up the shelf, like the castle towers. There's even the little toy doll here who's supposed to be the shopkeeper. So all of that is pretty expected and straightforward stuff. This one is kind of ridiculous, and I don't know if it's totally intentional, but this picture on the wall looks like Bold and Brash. When you interact with it, it says it's a yellow-eyed, poorly drawn picture of a green turtle. That's not totally what Bold and Brash is, I don't think, but realistically, this is probably actually just another instance of Everyman rather than Bold and Brash. Unfortunately. Still carrying the egg, which is super strange. If you try to drop it, it says, "What egg?" and now the egg is just gone. There's the ball of junk, which is basically all the stuff you accumulated down in the dark world. You can drop that as well. You really didn't want to throw it away. Throw it away anyways? Yes. Handshaking, you dropped the ball of junk on the ground. It broke into pieces. You felt bitter. So basically you just threw away everything that you just did in the dark world, and now there's no more items left to collect. This is just kind of a funny bit of dialogue if you interact with the lockers over and over again. The locker is locked. The locker's lock is locked. The lock's locker is locked. The locker's lock's locker is locked. It just cycles through again. It's just kind of a funny interaction. Same as in Undertale, it's still library rather than just a library. This guy, who doesn't really do a whole lot of anything, except for block your access to upstairs, it looks an awful lot like Gaster's follower from Undertale. If you peek through the doorway in the library here, you look through the window to the computer lab, there seems to be a dog inside working at a computer. Seems like it's making a game, seems like you shouldn't interrupt it. Seems like when the game's finished, you can go in. You just have to trust the dog. So it's kind of a direct reference to Toby Fox there working away on the game. If you read this bulletin board in the library, there's an anime review. If you read it, it's a monthly toon review from Mew Mew Kissy Cutie 2. This reviewer had Mew Mew 2 as her first exposure to the series, and let her tell you it makes Mew Mew 1 look like a dumpster with sparkly cat ears. With a darker storyline and more mature themes, the second one treats the viewer like a real adult, which might be a little bit of a meta thing that Delta Rune is potentially darker and more adult than Undertale. Sorta, kinda. But it goes on and on about what they do and don't like about it. Signed, the anonymous yellow lizard, which would be Alfie's, and it's kind of a funny contrast to the fact that she really hated Mew Mew Kissy Cutie 2 in Undertale, but loves it in Delta Rune. There's a million characters who reappear from the original game, all with different designs, which is pretty interesting. For example, Undyne no longer has an eye patch. The standout exception here is that Sans looks the exact same. What was once Grillby's in Undertale has now been taken over and is now Sans' shop. Far south of town, there's this door that's locked, covered in vines, all by itself. You can't really do anything with it. But when you stand even further south, kind of away from the door there, you start getting these weird sound effects playing. It's pretty dull and doesn't sound like a whole lot of anything, but if you turn it up and set it to 500%, it becomes those same sound effects from Gaster again. So that's pretty damn interesting, maybe something to be expanded on in Chapter 2. There's actually several other possible ties to Gaster in this game. There are a couple characters in the game that look a little bit like Gaster. Interestingly, they're the two shopkeepers, one of which is actually Rule's card. You can just see in the smile, the missing eye, there's just some very vague similarities going on there. Out of a very extensive original soundtrack, 9 of these are confirmed to use leitmotifs of Gaster's theme. A lot of theories about Gaster in this game floating around now. Gerson, the silly little turtle from Undertale, seems to have passed away because there's now a Gerson Boom memorial bench. And just next to that, we have a Gerson gravestone, renowned historian, author, and teacher. All 3 of these gravestones are actually quite significant. Crystal, a snowy gemstone for a proud mother. Mutler, a big bone for the leader of the pack. And Shira, a karaoke microphone for a brave singer. Now these are actually gravestones for the 3 amalgamates from Undertale. Or rather, the monsters who would have become the amalgamates. So it's just kind of nice to have them resting in peace rather than being horrible twisted monsters. You can talk to Burger Pants, who's now working for Icy's Pizza. You can talk to him about the people he works with. One of the things he has to say is, "Purple guy, man, that guy, you gotta..." Actually, does that guy even work here? Which is presumably a reference to Five Nights at Freddy's. I mean, he's probably likely just talking about this, but being a pizzeria and the specific wording and everything, it seems to be a reference to that. Here we can see Napstabluke's house. I'm afraid no one's home right now. Now, why don't you prance on home? You can keep interacting and it keeps telling you no one's here. Oh, you just wanted to talk to me? My apologies, beautiful. I'm afraid I'm a bit of a nobody. And because in Undertale, Mettaton was actually a previous inhabitant of this house, people theorize that maybe he's the one who's there now. Which would be really funny to think that Mettaton, rather than being the bombastic, boisterous TV personality, is like a recluse instead now. This entire interaction plays out very similarly to when you meet Asgore in Undertale during either a neutral or pacifist run. Is someone there? Just a moment, I've almost finished watering these flowers. Here we are. Howdy, how can I... This is another one of those super on-the-nose things, but these 7 flowers that Asgore has stashed away up here are the same colors as Flowey and the human souls. Alternately, with the egg, you can go to Asgore's house, and he only has a lowly pickle jar sitting in the fridge, so you can help him, you know, stay fed and put the egg in the fridge with the pickle. But when you come back to the fridge, it now says there's 2 eggs in the fridge. So, pretty weird little interaction there. Another layer to this is when you drop the egg, get the what egg dialogue, it suddenly just appears in the fridge. And you see, for some reason, a lone egg. It's an egg alongside the pickle jar rather than it turning it into an egg as well. For some reason, there's a lot of weird, separate, different possible interactions with this egg and this fridge. You decide to pass on it. Asgore, trying to patch things up with your mother, gives you a bouquet of flowers, which you can then give to Toriel, like the nice son that you are, but she's not too stoked on the fact that they came from Asgore. Worry not, Chris, I will find some place for them. So remember before, this smelled all flowery and nice, but if you leave and come back into the house, first of all, Toriel comments on the fact that you're being super active. Perhaps you can use some of that energy to wake up on time. Your brother cannot carry you to school anymore, you know. But if you go check in the trash can, somehow its floral scent has increased, so Toriel just threw them straight in the trash. You can keep playing around with this actually, and come and go from the house several more times to push that interaction further. It takes quite a few ducking ins and outs. Chris, why do you keep leaving and coming back? Would you like me to install a revolving door? Calling in the Dark World doesn't work at all when you call from in town. Toriel basically just tells you to walk home or that she's busy, and it's pretty basic dialogue. It's slightly different if you call from within the house. If you're in the bathroom of your own house and use the cell phone to call home, it rings. Hello, Dreamer residents, who might this be? Chris? Don't make me come over there. For some reason, there's a lot of ways to mess with Toriel. From the coming and going of the house, flushing the toilet, calling her repeatedly. I don't know if any of these fall under Easter eggs or anything like that, but it is fun to prank your goat mom. This isn't buried deep or hidden away or anything, but there is a small little reference to Super Smash Bros. If you go to the far east of town, past Asgore's place, these guys talk about hanging out next to the river and how nice that is. If you stand in this spot and just kind of hang out there for a few seconds, then eventually we get an old friend who emerges from the lake there to chat with. I'll let you guys discover that for yourselves to read the dialogue. Now, right from the beginning of the game, when you see this cage in the wagon, it looks like it's seen quite a few crashes. There's like a weird, ominous stain going on beside it there. It's not really sure what's going on. That maybe becomes more relevant at the very end of the game, so end game spoilers here. So the way this whole end scene plays out is already pretty damn messed up. But the fact that it said that the cage has been used often and there's a weird stain in the corner kind of hints at the idea, the possibility that this has happened before, that the soul is commonly being trapped within this cage. I don't know what the hell the implications of any of that may or may not be. It just seems to be kind of an interesting little thing to maybe consider here. We'll save that one for the game theorists. And during this segment, you can actually control the soul within the cage. So what's going on there? Was Chris a puppet the whole time? Just being controlled by this loose soul? I don't know, that's too much for me. There's been quite a bit of riddling around in the back-end code for this game already. There's a peculiar bit of unused dialogue that appears during the return. That's what the game calls itself when you defeat the final boss and return to town in the endgame. The lines read, "Where? Where am I? Hello? Anyone? Is anybody out there? Someone, anyone, can you hear me? It's dark. It's so dark here. Someone, anyone, if you can hear me, say something. Please." Pretty spooky call for help overall. A strong possibility is that this was meant for being behind the door with the vines, but we can't really know. If you right-click on the game file and look at its properties, the file version is listed as 666. There's some interesting things to do with 6 in the Undertale world, like the 6 human souls. I saw someone say that 666 is associated with Gaster, but maybe that just has to do with it being associated with, like, the devil. We have the Jevil in this game. It might not be a direct reference to anything, it might just be a fun little thing that Toby slipped in there. Now, I feel like this is going to turn into more weird conspiracy theory stuff, but in that opening sequence, it says the vessel and creator will be discarded. But technically, in the app data on your computer, that stuff is still stored. That might just be by nature of how the game code is written, but it might actually implicate that things aren't as they seem, and even though it tells you it's discarded, it was stored away somewhere. Even more interesting, if you dig through those files, there is a love meter. It defaults to 1.000 and it never changes because love isn't in the game the same way it was in Undertale. This could be a weird leftover relic of Toby's coding from Undertale, or again, it could hint at future things for this story. This is getting into some weird back-end stuff, but the way that Game Maker works, which Undertale and Delta Rune were both made in, each individual room is given a code number, so if you change your character's location in the code to 131 or anything higher than that, anything that isn't associated with an actual room in the game will instead transport you to this thing, and you instead have Doggy Rune. It's kind of an obscure secret, but I think Toby knew that people were going to go rooting around in the game files. I'd say that about puts a bow on things. It's a ridiculous amount of different things I know, many of which aren't Easter eggs or secrets or anything like that. But I don't know how else to categorize them. Hey, if you guys enjoyed this video, then maybe consider watching my playthrough of Delta Rune. I went into it totally blind, so I didn't discover the majority of this stuff while playing it myself. And I'll also have a link to Jimmy and the Pulsating Mass, which I think fans of Delta Rune are going to love. It's a fantastic game. Please check out that playthrough as well. I think you'll really enjoy it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Looking forward to Chapter 2. I'll see you again soon.